Hi, Draisha. Can you go ahead and give us a sound check? Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, team. Welcome to the August 12th episode of the Portland Planning Commission. I'll be your host, Steph Routh. And joining us in person today is Vice Chair Mariano O'Meara, Vice Chair Thompson, Commissioners Spivak and Pollock. Is that how you pronounce your letter? Thank heavens. Okay. And then online, we have Commissioners Knowles, Alvarado, and Brannon. We're a full house. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Want to start off with items of interest from commissioners. Okay, well, I have three. One, also happening concurrently with this commission is the Housing and Homelessness Committee for City Council, where they will be hearing today the Code Alignment Project. So we wish it well. Also, we are in the midst of a heat wave, so I just want to appreciate it is becoming the new normal. Very excited for our colleagues at the Sustainability and Climate Commission to be convening because we have some climate action goals to go get. And also appreciate all staff and volunteers who are supporting cooling shelters around the city. And you can go to the Multnomah County website to look at where cooling shelters are. And finally, you may have seen in the media recently, we will be talking later today about the Central City and major projects. That is obviously a major hub of regional significance. The other regional center in the city is Gateway, and there's some recent conversations around the Fred Meyer that is planning to close next month, and the shopping center that is currently for sale. So we'll be very interested. That does not directly relate to our work here. Our zoning work has been done several years ago in developing the tax increment financing district that is winding down in Gateway, but we wish it well. Any others now that I've saw-shooed? Okay, let us go to the director's report. Director Diefendorfer.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Nice to be here with you today. Patricia Diefendorfer, Chief Planner for the record. Just a few things on the director's report Chair Routh covered one of the things, which is that the Code Alignment Project is at the Housing and Homelessness Committee today, at Council Committee today, so we'll learn more about the outcomes of that. Also wanted to just advise you all that the city is undertaking an update of the advisory bodies of the city, and it's an active project going on right now. This iteration, there was a study done towards the end of the year last year that reported on the status of advisory bodies in the city, and I think this is kind of a follow-up to that, recognizing that there may be some opportunities to better align the advisory bodies with the new form of government. So that project is called the Advisory Bodies Enhancement Project. The timeline for the project is April through December of this year. There's actually, there's a website for the project, and there's 5 deliverables that are expected to come out of the project. But one of the reasons I've brought it up here, well, a couple reasons. One is that there's an opportunity to provide feedback. There's a form that's available. You all, as commissioners with your experience serving on an advisory body, if you're interested in reviewing those materials and providing feedback, that's an opportunity that we wanted to make you aware of. Also, many of you know we've been engaging over the last couple of months in a conversation. It's largely been the officers of the Planning Commission, the vice chairs and the chair have been joining city staff, BPS staff, and some members of the Community Involvement Committee to talk about options for the future of that committee and that function. And we're exploring different options. State planning goals require community involvement. It's one of the state planning goals. The way the city of Portland has opted to fulfill that obligation is to create, at the time that we were updating the comprehensive plan, we created an independent community involvement committee. They largely advise staff on community involvement as it relates to various projects and the best practices around engaging community in planning projects. They sometimes see other projects in the Bureau, but really, per state law, their function and charge really is more about the planning of the land use function and how to get people engaged in that. So we are continuing to have that conversation. The officers are actually joining us for a meeting this evening. Thank you for dedicating so much of your day to business of the city. We will be having subsequent conversations about whether it's appropriate for that function to potentially be folded into the Planning Commission as a function of the Planning Commission, or whether we might opt to maintain an independent, separate community involvement committee, but with maybe some enhancement. So we will report back more on that in the future, but just wanted to give you kind of the lay of the land as it relates to advisory bodies and some activity that's going on. The final thing is I heard a little bit of discussion, but we did want to just bring back today the discussion that we started a little bit at the last meeting about the Development Review Advisory Committee, and that as we know, there's a Portland Planning Commission representative on that committee. Commissioner Spivak serves in that function currently. He's currently serving out a term that will end in November 8th, I believe. And so I know we had a discussion about is identifying potentially some other commissioner who may be interested in participating on the DRAC. And so just wanted to kind of open that up for a little bit of a discussion here. We have some time. We don't have to decide, but that appointment does have to go to council, so there's a little bit of lead time that would be needed to identify a replacement for Eli. So just wanted to put that out there and see if there's any questions or discussion about that.
Yeah, Vice Chair O'Mara, for the record, I am interested. I have some questions. And so I'm wondering what the timing is for council appointment, if we know that. And that could determine how much time I have to understand a little bit more about the responsibilities.
Okay, so we can get you some more information about the process and the timeline for appointment, and then we can take it from there. Does that, yep, sure.
Is DRAC one of the commissions being evaluated in this study? I'm just wondering whether I could totally see it evolving from what it has been lately.
All commissions, all of the advisory bodies of the city are part of this evaluation that's happening. To your point, I don't know exactly whether that report is ultimately going to make recommendations about specific bodies or just kind of provide some general guidance for the city. So I don't really have an answer to that, but I think that's an interesting observation. And yeah.
There's a couple members, myself included, who have talked about like how this group could be most effectively used to support the city. And I think that if I were on it, or if we have a new member on it, it would be fantastic. Would be nice to think that through a little bit.
Sure. Well, I would maybe make a suggestion that you certainly could use this process if you wanted to provide some input. I don't know, again, the input, I'm not sure if they're looking for input on individual advisory bodies or not, but obviously, coordinating with the staff who supports the commission over at Portland Permitting and Development probably sounds like a great first avenue. I don't know if you've had those conversations, but yeah, I think we'd all be a little bit curious to understand better your thoughts on that. So thank you. I think otherwise that concludes the director's report for now. Happy to answer any questions.
Nothing additional, assuming it is still a committee that continues. I still have interest, and I assume it's acceptable to just follow up with Commissioner Spivak with questions.
Sure. And,
Okay.
and as we noted, we can give you some more information about the timeline for the appointment process.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
And thank you. I think you're keeping Commissioner Ames from being nominated in absentia, so I'm sure he thanks you. We would like to move on to the consent agenda, which is entirely consideration of the meeting minutes from July 22nd. Would anyone like the honors?
I motion to approve the minutes from last meeting. So last meeting.
Beautiful. Commissioner Pollock moves. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Great. All in favor? You can get a verbal aye.
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 Sweet.
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. And it is passed. And on to our first substantive agenda item, and would love Jeff Cottle and Daniel Subbing to come in. This is the Public Infrastructure Environmental Code Project. This is a continuation from July 22nd, and this is a work session potentially recommendation, or we continue. So thank you very much, team. Take it away. I'm sorry, one more thing. Are there any disclosures from members of the Planning Commission? Okay, great. Thank you.
Sharing right now.
I think I'm sharing. Is that? Okay.
So thank you for having us back. Yeah, we're here to talk about the Public Infrastructure Environmental Code Project. And yeah, for the record, my name is Jeff Cottle. I use he, him pronouns, and I manage the River Environmental Team at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Yes, this is a follow-up to that, to our July 22nd hearing. And we'll kind of just, if you want to go to the agenda, I was unable to make it, but I am happy to be here today. I'm really just going to kind of kick us off real quick, and then Daniel will do a short presentation, and then we'll just really looking forward to conversation today about the different amendments and if there's any other questions we can answer. And we do have one proposed amendment from Commissioner Spivak, but so for today, we'll just do a very brief review of the project itself. Won't go into the detail that we did in July, but just a little recap, and then a little bit review of the testimony that we heard and some of the responses that we provided in the memo to you on some of that testimony. Like I said, we have an amendment that Commissioner Spivak has proposed, or that we understand would like to propose, and then we'll leave it up for discussion. We do know that Commissioner Spivak has something for discussion as well, and we have a couple of slides for that as well. And then, yes, if we get there, we'll talk about recommendation and then the letter for City Council. But with that, I'll just pass it over to Daniel.
Thank you, Jeff. So I'll just start by briefly recapping what this project is about. This is a set of zoning code amendments that apply to Portland's environmental overlay zones. They're primarily targeted at allowing for the maintenance, upgrade, and replacement of public infrastructure and for the management of vegetation within environmental zones on public property. And the impetus for this project, why this project is needed, is because public infrastructure serves important and vital functions throughout the city, And we have a lot of old and aging infrastructure that is located within environmental overlay zones that needs to be replaced. And so this project will facilitate the replacement of those existing facilities. This project is grouped into 4 buckets or categories of amendments. We have the replacement of pump stations and flood control structures, management of natural areas, the removal and replacement of trees, and then some miscellaneous and technical amendments. And I would also note that there are a handful of amendments that go beyond just public infrastructure. They apply broadly to both public and private properties. And so this is the staff proposal. Staff proposes that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to City Council that City Council adopt the Public Infrastructure and Environmental Code Project proposed draft. And the staff proposal also is that the Planning Commission would recommend to City Council to amend the following chapters of the zoning code as listed on the slide here.
So then one other note related to that, just as a reminder, there's no zoning map changes, so we're not changing the boundaries of where environmental zones are. It's really very much focused on the code, specific code within the various environmental chapters.
And just to recap briefly, the public testimony that we heard at the last hearing, we did not have any oral testimony, but there were 14 pieces of written testimony, a couple of which came in just right before the last hearing. And so we want to kind of go over some of those topics of testimony that we received and go through some of the things that we as staff have proposed as ways to respond to that testimony. So the key topics that we heard included the Port of Portland. They requested that they be added or allowed to use some of those proposed amendments that are in the project. And then we heard testimony about the River Environmental Overlay Zone. There were some comments that the tree removal and pruning allowances or regulations that are in the River Environmental Code are stricter than they are in the other environmental overlay zones in Portland. And going into a little bit more detail, one of the things that was a topic of discussion at that last hearing was regarding the difference between the PBOT right-of-way standards, which allow for the removal of trees that are associated with right-of-way development, and the fact that there are no requirements for replanting of trees with that right-of-way standard. And we just noted that yes, there are no requirements for tree replacement, but there are requirements that as roads are built by PBOT or by applicants to meet PBOT standards, there are requirements that street trees are planted. So, so it's not exactly the same as the impacts and revegetation and tree replacement that applies to the Bureau of Environmental Services and their facilities, but there are some tree planting requirements that are associated with PBOT road development. And then regarding the pruning and management of pruning and tree management within the river environmental overlay, when river overlays were first adopted about 8-9 years ago, the decision was made at that time to be more restrictive in terms of allowances for tree pruning and tree removal within the river environmental overlay. That was a conscious decision that was made for a variety of different reasons. And we'd note as project staff that there is an upcoming project, the Willamette North Reach project, which will be looking at applying the river overlay within the northern reach of the Willamette, which is the northern half north of the Broadway Bridge of Portland. And that at that time, there'll be an opportunity to more comprehensively look at those tree replacement and tree repruning standards. And that project, even though it's focused geographically on the North Reach, it will have the ability to make changes to the entire river overlay throughout the whole city. So we feel like that will be a time for more robust engagement and a time that we can spend a little bit more time more deeply looking at those tree pruning and removal standards and see if there aren't some changes that need to be made at that time. And that is a project that will be happening in the next couple of years. So you'll be seeing that in the not too distant future. And then regarding the Port of Portland, so since that last hearing, we have conferred with staff at the Port of Portland and talked through some of the concerns that they raised there. What we proposed to them was that we have this Columbia Corridor and Industrial Lands E-Zone project that's happening in the near future. We expect later this year to be at the Planning Commission with that project. And so we told them that those are some things that we can review during the time that we're working on the amendments for that project. And we highlighted 3 of the items that we specifically looked at that we thought were things that need further consideration. So the vegetation management on levees, that's an amendment that's in this project, an exemption that would allow the Port of Portland to do that, or that would allow, as currently proposed, it allows the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District to do that, and we'd be looking at whether the port would need to or should be able to avail themselves of that exemption as well. There's a standard for tethered floating features, and then there's also the expansion of standards for flood and wastewater control facilities. And so those are all things that we thought would be good to explore as part of the Columbia Corridor project. And one of those topics is a subject that Commissioner Spivak was hoping to discuss here. So we'll move on to that next. But
Yeah, just quickly, I'm realizing now that technically the tethered floating structures is a standard. It's not an exemption, so it is something that would still need to be approved, and we'll talk about it again because Commissioner Feedback's amendment is related to that. But it's not that it would just be allowed outright. It would still require city approval, and that was just a mistake, typo.
thanks for catching that. So this is the amendment that Commissioner Spivak proposes. And so I'll introduce it really quickly and then allow you, Commissioner Spivak, to talk more about it. But this is a standard for the installation of tethered floating features. These would be floating, basically wetlands that are providing habitat within water bodies. And the reason that this is important is because these levee-protected water bodies, you can't really plant trees along the levees themselves, and because the roots would undermine the levees. So this allows for the installation of some floating features in the water body itself where you can't get shading from the trees. And as currently, as you see, it's restricted to just the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District and the Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. And Commissioner Spivak, I don't know if you want to lead a discussion on this.
This was actually not especially substantive, but from the testimony received from the Port of Portland, this is one item that in your memo, you thought, yeah, we kind of like this one. And I kind of think that the idea of tethered floating wetland features is fun. So I think the Port of Portland should be allowed to do them also.
And I guess another note, as you can see from the top there, it's under the category of a resource enhancement project, so it's really within the context of projects that are specifically focused on resource enhancement. But this is, and I think, for the Bureau of Environmental Services as well, it's locations where maybe it's riprap bank or something like that where they can't do that, and they believe that these are viable and can provide habitat where you might not otherwise see it. So, and we don't necessarily have any issue with adding the port in cases where this is irrelevant. Yeah.
What's our process? Or at least I can make this motion I'll make a motion to add the Port of Portland as eligible to install tethered floating wetlands as described in this section 170.
Seconded.
Okay,
Mr. Pollack for the record.
great. Shall we take a moment for discussion?
Sorry, Commissioners Patricia Diefenhofer. Yeah, I think it's fine for us to go ahead and if you want to take a moment and vote on this particular motion, and then we can continue. There's just a couple more slides.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Commissioner Thompson, Vice Chair Thompson.
So just to ask really pointedly, from the memo and what you're saying now, staff doesn't see any downside and you don't have any concern with including them in this standard?
No, I mean, one of the reasons why we were sort of comprehensively thinking about continuing the conversation with the port is how applicable is it? We still aren't totally sure on that, but we don't see there's no necessarily issue with them, and we see it as an opportunity, and especially because it's supported by the Bureau of Environmental Services, they seem it's a viable option for providing habitat, both to for fish species as well as, birds and wildlife and things. So we don't have any issue with it. Yeah.
And I think I would emphasize too that within the Columbia Sluice system, it's not a navigational channel, so it's not going to impede traffic of commercial vessels or things like that, where that might be more of a concern in the Willamette River, but we don't apply the environmental overlays in the Willamette, so that's not really a concern here. Or not the conservation protection zone, it's a separate overlay that's on the Willamette.
Thank you. Other questions, thoughts? Okay, shall we call the roll? And this is specific to this amendment to be added into the package, which we will either today or at our next work session vote on.
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Brannon,
Yes.
Commissioner Knowles,
Yes.
Vice Chair Amara,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Chair Routh.
Aye. Okay. Great. Check. Please continue. Thank you.
All right, and then we had a couple of discussion topics, or just a discussion topic that Commissioner Spivak also wanted to introduce as well, too. And this is in regards to one of the proposed changes that we have that would apply to both public and private development. So we have in both the general development standards and in the land division standards, a limit on the number of native trees that can be removed. And the trees can only be removed within a specified radius around buildings or driveways or things like that. But even within that radius, there's a limit on the number of native trees that you can remove that's based on the total diameter inches of those trees. And the reason for this amendment that we're proposing is because in a lot of cases in residential development, when these trees are removed, there oftentimes is not a sufficient space to plant all the native trees that are required. So there's not only a tree removal allowance, but there's also a tree replacement requirement. And it's not just a one-to-one tree replacement, it's oftentimes multiple trees to one. And so what ends up happening is that there's a requirement for 50 or 60 trees to be replanted on a site, but there's really no adequate space on the site. And so then the project gets kicked into environmental review, and then the tree replacement numbers are oftentimes reduced in that situation. So this is getting the allowance of tree removal to a level that's consistent with what is oftentimes more likely to be able to be replaced on an individual site. And then I'll show the other slide too. This is the other place in the code that this would impact is also in the tree removal associated with land divisions. And so you can see in the standard, it's number of trees that can be removed per site. So if you're doing a 10-unit subdivision, then each of those 10 units could do up to 175 inches of tree removal.
And I think another note is remember that the tree replacement requirements still apply to non-natives. We have just, again, from a policy decision said that natives are treated differently and have that specific limit. And so I think, as we've been saying, although there might be situations where you can accommodate, so if you think about it, 225 inches, so let's say 10, 20-inch trees, 22-inch trees. So we're talking about planting as a result of that based on our replacements, like 50 trees on the site, separate from any non-natives that you're removing and that sort of thing. So there might be cases where you have enough room, but really to a certain degree, what we're hearing from permitting and development is often it's sort of, this is really trying to be sort of truth in advertising in terms of mostly you're not going to be able to meet the standard because you aren't going to be able to plant as many. So trying to bring it down to where it's a more reasonable number that could be better, where the tree replacement can actually better, fit on the site assumption, through the assumption. But we don't necessarily, in terms of going back to 225, it's just, again, the same. There's still potential for any number between 175 and 225 to end up just having to go through land use review, or even less potentially, depending on the size of the site. But we were just, again, trying to make sure that it's a little bit more, accurate in terms of what could really be expected to be accommodated on the site.
I'll just say why I flagged this one, and I don't have really strong opinions on it, but it seems an odd way of doing a standard because this threshold applies whether it's a quarter-acre or 30-acre site. It seems like if the goal is to improve the standard, it would be to, rather than have a fixed number to avoid the situation you're describing, it would be to say this many caliper inches per acre, or this, like, that would be logically to me the way to avoid the issue that the planning's, and I suspect that even if you go from 225 to 175, there'll still be sites where you take out 170 inches and there's no freaking way you could ever plant them back. So it doesn't, it feels like it doesn't quite solve the problem that's raised. I'm not as concerned, I think, maybe as that, but maybe I'll have more sympathy with PP&D about truth in advertising, because there's lots of places in the code where it technically allows something, but you just can't fit. And this is an example where it technically allows you to remove up to 225 inches, but you can't fit the replacement tree, so you can't do it. You have to go through the discretionary process in that case. And then the other flag I had is that this is going to impact someone with an R10 site on an acre doing a subdivision. Like, what's the likelihood that person heard this project was happening? This project's called Public Works. What's it called? It's
Public infrastructure.
Public infrastructure. And I just feel like I wasn't involved in the communication of the project. Some people track land use closely, but it felt like, it feels like, and I've been guilty of this, it feels like scope creep for this project to like mess with a quantitative thing and a rule that I'm not a big fan of in the first place in a setting where people who are impacted for it might not have heard about it or might have a reason. The port obviously heard about it. They wrote it in their letter, but I'm not sure other people would. So as I said, I don't have a strong opinion, but my thought and thinking on it is that I'm not sure I like the solution, and I'm not sure I like the public outreach with it.
Commissioner Spivak, I almost hear in this, and I appreciate this item for discussion. I wonder if there is, like a few of the other issues flagged that could go to a different project. Is there another?
I don't know.
Yeah, so, like, is there another upcoming project that where this could be more handily considered?
Commissioners, I'll just offer this, and then staff can certainly correct me or elaborate as appropriate. I would say that I think we were just trying to resolve an issue that PP&D has raised as an implementation challenge. I think as far as the outreach, I would say to the extent that this is kind of reducing the burden of the requirement, I feel, that there's people, would not be necessarily unhappy with this as a proposal. That being said,
Back here, I think it's actually making a bigger burden, because if you have a lot where you need to take down 200 inches, you can no longer do it by right through this. Staff can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
okay? So apparently I have it backwards. So thank you for correcting me on that. But so let me just also
Requires,
say,
land use review where otherwise it would not. Yeah.
okay, so it actually requires it where it would
Yeah,
not.
it would
Okay.
push, it would push more projects to land use review.
Okay,
I mean,
thank
well, the question is to whether it actually in reality would, but yes, it would limit the number of straightaway would allow to be used.
Well, I'll just say that, that's something I had a different understanding. But nonetheless, I'll also say that it's possible that we could remove this change right now. And to your point, Chair Routh, I think we have a couple of projects that are coming up where we may have the opportunity to investigate this question a little bit more and see if we can find a different or better solution. Or we could take the tact of making the change now, but understanding that we might, revise it in a future project. So I'll defer to Daniel and Jeff as to whether they think those are viable options, but that was my initial thought.
And this is open for discussion, right? That's the point of this one. Okay, so I do have a question, because I've seen how we're like addressing mitigation banking in other parts. Would this be an opportunity to also do that for trees? Because while we might be allowing the removal of trees or not replacing as many, why not take those resources and put them where we might need trees in other places? I mean, the city spends a lot of investments via grant funding per se to put trees in other places. So maybe this is another opportunity to do kind of a mitigation banking for that, to get more canopy where it needs to be.
That's a great point, and that actually is in terms of how it applies to the general development standards. That actually is part of the project proposals. We are allowing for the revegetation fee to be used for native tree replacement, which it never was previously. So that is one way we're addressing that, and that will allow for the Parks Bureau, their urban, it's not urban forestry, but they haven't.
Nature. Yeah.
Yeah.
The parks group that does it's called City Nature, but yeah. they'll be managing and planting. I mean, the terminology of the mitigation banking, it's not really mitigation banking. That's a little bit different, but that we are providing more opportunity where you would be able, that is, the general intent of the re-veg fee is that then are able to plant elsewhere on a larger site, and trees would be a significant part of that. We also do have an opportunity, I think as we discussed in July, there's what we're calling kind of advanced mitigation, that where you could do tree replacement in the same way, which is more like a mitigation bank, and that's currently just for city bureaus, advanced mitigation. Anyhow, where basically we are doing that, we are allowing that kind of structure where you would do a mitigation in the front end. And then, so if you think about it for city bureaus, they have multiple projects that need mitigation that follow that larger mitigation site that has been established. And then they pull down the added kind of benefit that is created at that restoration site. So we are also allowing for something that is more like a mitigation bank that could be used by bureaus. And I think to some of the discussions we've had with Commissioner Spivak, there's a world where, it's right now, and I guess in the past, a lot of the mitigation has been project by project and having to figure out where is it going to go. And it's maybe a bureau might have a site that they use. And maybe this advanced mitigation also allows for the potential for, by service area or the city as a whole, does an upfront type of mitigation that then could be drawn down by future projects by a whole range of, bureaus. PBOT. I mean, in terms of our question about the right-of-way, for example, if you wanted to change it to where it was equal across and we did apply tree requirements to the right-of-way, maybe they could take advantage of that sort of thing where the city has done these larger kind of upfront mitigation sites and then being able to pull from it for things like tree replacement or mitigation more generally.
And I see that Commissioner Knowles has his hand up, but just before we address that, I wanted to also point out that for the standards for land divisions, we are not allowing the revegetation fee currently to be used for tree replacement. So it is allowed for the general development standards, but with land divisions, the thought is that there will probably, on a site with an E-zone, there'll be a natural resource tract, and so there should be space within that resource tract for tree planting, was the thinking behind allowing it for general development standards, but not for land divisions. But I just wanted to point that out, that those are being treated differently in terms of which ones can use the revegetation fund.
Commissioner Brandon, did you have any follow-ups? Did that answer your question?
I think so. I just wanted it to be a consideration.
Oh, great.
I think, again, and before we move on to follow up on Daniel's point, so we are also expanding the standards that can use the revegetation fee. So aside from this question where we're just looking at the 225 down to 175, and we've identified a couple of where those are in those changes in the code, we are expanding the standards that could use the re-veg fee beyond what is currently in the code. So it is a broader allowance related to using the re-veg fee that's included as part of this project.
Thank you. Commissioner Knowles.
So I'm curious what the geographic area is that this is applicable to. So this language says 225 or 175 per lot. So is that a platted lot? Is it a site? What is the definition that applies here?
Yeah, so in the case of a land division, if you're doing one lot that you're dividing into 5 lots or 10 lots or whatever, you'd get 175 diameter inches per created lot. So each of those lots could do 175 individually. And again, the expectation is the trees would only be removed within 10 feet of the building or the driveways that are associated with those buildings. But yeah, each individual lot could avail themselves of that allowance.
And does this only apply in land division situations, or is this also applicable during review of a specific development for an existing lot?
Yeah, the general development standards will apply across all types of proposals in the E-zone. So the different land use types can take advantage of the general development standards, and that's the general development standards are the process where you get approval for a project without going through land use review. So you can, as long as you keep your project within the framework that's allowed in those standards, you can do that without going through land use review. But it does
Okay,
apply
thank
across
you.
the city. That's just if that was part of your question about the geography. So the E-zone, that's one of the things is the environmental overlay zone. As Daniel said, we have a specific zone that kind of more specifically addresses the Willamette River, but the environmental zone, as we presented in a map in July, it really applies to natural resources throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Spivak, you went, oh.
Yeah, somehow I thought it was for the whole site, so it's not. So if you had a 10-lot subdivision, you could, by right, under current rules, or under the new rules, to say, remove 1,750.
That's true. Well, right, yeah, right now you
Caliper
can
inches?
do 2,000.
Well, 100, you
Yeah.
could remove 10
Yeah,
lots.
so land divisions, the general development standards versus land divisions have a different implication because, yeah, it is, again, it's under certain circumstances for where you're proposing development. But yes, part of the land division is that each of the sites have the ability, as you would in a general development standard type approach, if you were coming in later and the lot existed, you have the same allowance for those that you have created, as long as they're, again, meeting with the driveways and the proposed development, things like that.
And even beyond that, if there was a street created as part of that subdivision, you could also remove trees within the right-of-way for that street as well, so it could
And
go.
10 feet either side, right? Yeah, right. Interesting. I'm just interested that people are butting into this a lot. It sounds like for PP&D to raise it, to create a number of lots where on one or more of the lots, people are removing.
I don't think it's so much for the land division issue. We were just, again, as we had talked about, we try to make things relatively consistent where we have these maximums. I mean, to be honest, permitting development does think that even the ones, like for land divisions, there's a lot of trees that could be removed, to your point. But again, I think more what we're hearing from them is related to the general development standards. So existing lots and things like that where you don't have as much room. Again, as we're talking about, really it's about the limitations of where you can plant and things like that. So I don't think it's as much about the land division issue as it is. But again, we're just ensuring consistency across these two.
I don't remember this issue coming up too much in the little testimony that we had. Is that accurate? And was it just the port that commented on this specifically, and what was their stance?
The port said that they have a lot of sites that are quite large, multiple acres in size, and they felt like they have adequate space on their sites for tree replanting, and so they don't face the same limitations that a constrained small residential site does, and so they felt like they, similar to Commissioner Spivak's point that, if Commissioner Spivak was saying it should be scaled to the site size, and they were saying in their case, with very large sites, there's never really a problem with the space to replant trees.
Okay, and so outside of PPD, through your outreach, was there any other specific support or feedback on this?
No, we
Okay,
heard
thank you.
nothing on this. There's another thing that comes into, we've had conversations with PP&D about how often the tree replacement actually does kick people into environmental review. And they said that more often than not, the thing that's really going to be constraining is the limitations on the allowed disturbance area. There's a separate standard that says it's mostly about residential, but you get per base zone. If in the R7, you get 3,500 square feet of allowed disturbance area. In the R10, R20, RFs, the really big sites, you get up to 5,000 square feet. And so in a lot of these cases, when you're removing a whole bunch of trees, you're probably also going to exceed those disturbance area limitations and go to environmental review anyways. So it's the two kind of go hand in hand, and you're most likely going to trip both of those up in those situations where you're going to environmental review.
Commissioner Spivak.
I guess I thought the port requested this change in their letter, I believe.
They did, yes. Yeah, that
It
was the
wasn't
only.
just they didn't care. It was on the list.
They were just saying that they think they have adequate space for that, yeah. But we're saying that they sometimes, like, we expect that often, the development limitation, the amount of disturbance area that you can have would also push them into land use review anyways, but.
Yeah, we've been reviewing a lot of port sites because we have this Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project coming up, and so seeing the way that E-zones are typically applied, it's usually around the margins of the port sites, and any industrial site really, where you have the the slough, and then you have a multi-acre site that abuts the slough on one side. And so the way that the limitations on disturbance area would come into play in those situations is that you get an allowed, on an industrial site, it's like a half acre, maybe an acre of allowed disturbance area, but you have to subtract from that any area on the site that's not in the E-zone in order to get permission to develop in the E-zone. And so in almost all cases, there's going to be multiple acres that are outside of the E-zone. So if you do anything to touch the resource site of an E-zone on an industrial site, you're almost always triggering environmental review just because of those disturbance area limitations. So you're never going to even get to the point where you could remove 200 diameter inches of trees without going to review anyways.
But I think to the original point, I mean, this was largely a lot of the sort of impetus of this package was we were assuming that we do a lot of these sort of technical clarifications and things like that as part of projects all the time, and these things were included in the Columbian Corridor Industrial Lands project. We could, if you all are interested in just keeping it 225, we can push it to that project, and it will, to Commissioner Spivak's point, there will be a specifically private interest. There already, I'm sure you all are aware, there's a lot of interest in terms of the Columbia Corridor associated with the economic opportunities analysis. So private entities will be very aware of what's happening with that project. So if that's something that you want us to do, that's fine too. Yeah. Keeping the status quo is fine.
Okay. Well, I might as well. To move us on, I'm going to propose an amendment that we leave it back at 225 and would be welcome it attended to that project, at the recap or somewhere, and maybe there's some scaling because it still seems odd to have the same standard for a quarter acre as it is for 30-acre site. So I would propose that we amend out that change to make it 225 in those instances.
Was it 225 before, or was it 175?
Yeah,
It's
so
currently
It
225.
would maintain
so it
the
would
existing,
Clarify.
reverse to the
Would be-
existing, yeah.
Yeah, just
This is
revert to existing language.
Changing the proposed draft to be current staff language, current
Okay.
code language, yeah.
So actually, that would not require,
Well, I think we have to amend the proposed draft to amend out the change.
Yes.
Okay.
So you would need to, we would need to reverse, we would need to just remove those two code sections to keep the existing code.
I'll second that, but
Someone-
I do.
Sorry, could you make the motion just? a
I'll
little
clarify
bit
the
more
motion. The
clear?
motion is
Yeah.
to change those two, remove those two code sections from the proposed draft as we go to the recommended draft so that it will read 225 caliber inches as it does today.
Thank you, because there are other changes in those sections that we don't want to be reversing. So we're specifically focused on the 225 versus the 175. Yes.
thank you.
And I don't know, we can specifically,
I'll second so we can continue the discussion, but I do have a clarifying question. I wanted to make sure that we're just changing the number and the per parcel provision to use 175 or 225 in a subdivision scenario. That doesn't change. We're just changing the number. Okay.
yeah, we would just go back, we would make, it would basically be that is not changing. It would stay with the current code, which allows 225. And in the land division, it's per lot, yeah.
Before we move on before that, sorry,
Just
very
to
briefly,
clarify,
just
okay.
briefly, does anyone, is anyone unclear on the motion proposed?
And we're happy to bring up the code language again and highlight which areas, where would, specifically what would be changing.
Why don't you bring up the slide? Yeah.
Yeah, bring up the two slides.
Okay, please.
I was simply going to just add, pardon me, that we are going to retain the 225 as is today in both sections that were proposed to be amended, both the general development standards and the land division
Land
section.
divisions, yeah.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yes. So those are the two sections, and yeah, Daniel's highlighted. Essentially, so what we would do is no longer strike through 225. It would just go back to as it was, as it exists right now in the code.
There's a question online, Chair Rao.
Okay, and, thank you. Okay, sorry, Commissioner Knowles.
Thank you. So can staff just summarize, please, the effect of this change to retain the existing code as opposed to what you proposed? And again, summarize why you proposed it, just so we can wrap this discussion together, please?
Yeah, so the implication would be that so we had proposed to reduce to 175, so there are a development that proposes to remove between 175 and 225 would now potentially be able to continue to use this standard, whereas when it goes down to 175, they would not have the opportunity to use this, and so they would have to go through land use review. So what it means is there still might be, as we are hearing from permitting and development, there are still going to be cases where in that situation where someone is proposing to remove 190 inches of native trees, they will not be able to replant on their site and will have to go through land use review anyways. But there will be, if you have the space on your site and you can accommodate all of the trees on the site, you will still be able to use that and not have to be approved through land use review. To revisit why we are doing this, it was largely because permitting and development has communicated to us that they are having, it is very frequently, this standard really can't be used because of the large number, when you are removing this amount of native trees from a site, you get kicked into land use review anyways because you're unable to accommodate the tree planting that is associated with this in combination with any non-natives that you're also removing, because you have to plant the same ratios regardless of whether they're native or non-native. And so those large number of trees that are required to be planted basically means that they have to have an environmental review to evaluate what your alternatives are for meeting this in the intent of the E-zone code, and you can no longer use the standard.
I mean, I guess I would just comment that I'm generally inclined to defer to the folks who are implementing these codes. They've said this would be an improvement, and I want to give them some credit for that and some credit for their expertise.
Commissioners, I don't know if this is helpful at all, but I just wanted to add a thought, and maybe Jeff and Daniel, you can make sure that this is correct. But when we talk about development, I think it's always helpful to understand contextually what kind of development we're talking about, and so what scale of impact this is. It seems to me like generally what we're talking about, and Daniel and Jeff, please correct me, is this seems to come up in instances where we're largely dealing with single dwelling zoning and single dwelling lots. And then on the other end of the spectrum, it seems like it can come up in areas where we have industrial zoning and industrial uses. So those are kind of the two predominant situations in which this comes up. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but for me, it's always helpful to know, like, how are we affecting, our ability to, our housing capacity and, our ability to have multi-unit development and mixed-use development in high-density areas. And this affects those kinds of areas and those particular zones, I think, a little bit less, just given where the resources are. So if that's helpful.
Chair O'Meara. Yeah, Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record, I think because there is the impact on single-family projects and the outreach was not extensive in that area, that I would recommend we move forward with reverting this and then putting this in another project where that outreach can be extended.
Others, thoughts? Okay. Does everyone, because we've had there's been a lot of conversation, and it feels pretty granular. Does everyone, I just want to ask, does everyone feel that they have the information that they need in order to make a vote on this proposal? Is there anyone who does not? Okay. Well, how about we've had a motion, a second, our discussion. Seems as, Autumn, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Aye, just unmuting myself.
Commissioner Brannan,
Sorry, had to plug in the computer. Aye, yes.
Commissioner Knowles,
No.
Vice Chair O'Mara,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak,
Aye. And Knowles, I appreciate split votes. I love them. Thanks.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Chair Routh.
I was going to say the same thing, Commissioner Spivak, but aye. Okay.
So that motion
That
carries.
motion also carries. And yeah, I believe we're towards the end, no?
Yeah, we don't have anything else for you. So really, it's a question of whether you have anything else you would like to discuss or any feedback we can provide you on potential additional changes, but that's all that we had for today, other than talking about recommendation and transmit a letter and that sort of thing.
Great, thank you. Are there other, and I appreciate Commissioner Spivak for bringing those up today in advance. Are there other aspects or like, you don't like to do it, but last minute amendments that people are craving?
I think just an understanding of the process. So now that that has been voted, that is done. That is moved forward and complete.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that question. We would, at this point, kind of discuss the package in its entirety and then at some point, if everyone feels comfortable, that we would entertain a motion to move the package forward with those two amendments. And then were that to pass, or whatever state that it passes in, then we would, as Jeff had mentioned, talk about what we would want to say in a transmittal letter, which is basically kind of the cover letter to this package that is our recommendation as, so that we can memorialize some of the considerations, further work, questions that we have going forward, other considerations.
So that would be where we'd put some folks' considerations on the community outreach and making sure the right people know.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. Great. General thoughts? Comments, questions? Would anyone be interested in moving? And is there a slide at which we could bring up sample language to ensure that we are?
Danielle, can you just bring up the recommendation slide? Yeah. So this is what staff would be asking the commission to recommend in its motion.
Would anyone online like to make a motion?
And also, no, I think you want to
With
say
the
it
amend-
as amended as well. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
So thank you, Jeff. I was just about to say that with the amendments that were just approved, the two amendments that were just approved.
I'll go ahead and make that motion. This is Alvarado. I move that we adopt the Public Infrastructure Environmental Code project proposed draft with the amendments and the following chapters of Title 33 Planning and Zoning as listed in the proposed draft. 33.274 radio frequency transmission facilities, 33.430 environmental zones, 33.465 Pleasant Valley Natural Resources Overlay Zone, 33.475 River Overlay Zones, and 33.910 definitions.
Thank you. And would anyone like to second? And Commissioner Alvarado has done the heavy lifting of of sharing the entire.
Seconded?
Okay, great. And that was Vice Chair O'Mara. Final discussion before we call the full roll.
Chair Rath, I just wanted the motion was to approve these changes. I just wanted to, for the record, say approve and recommend that city council adopt
Okay, yeah.
as,
Motion include as
shown.
amended?
Yes.
Okay,
And
good.
as amended, yes.
Okay. Autumn, could we ask you to call the roll?
Commissioner Alvarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Brannan,
Yes.
Commissioner Knowles,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Mara,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak,
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Chair Routh.
Aye. Thank you very much. Well, so that passes, and we can now move to talking about what we would like to say in the transmittal letter. And this is, again, kind of memorializing some of the points of discussion, things that we want to consider potentially for future work. Like, so for example, if there's specific work that we wanted to defer, to make sure that that's highlighted in a letter. And also, like, for folks in split votes, memorializing what that tension was.
Only one.
Yeah.
I'd support including the transmission letter staff's idea of revisiting the pruning and tree removal requirements for dead, dying trees as part of the North Beach project. And I guess also looking for a place to the 175, 225 elsewhere. And I'm not sure where to go with it, but it's still sticking with me that the threshold for tree removal is significantly different between whether it's PBOT or whether it's BES or parks. But I don't yet have a clear plan of what to do with it, so I'm not sure it's formulated enough to put into a letter. If someone else has an idea, I'm open to hearing it, but yeah, so I won't propose that, but one.
So when I
There's
get,
some questions,
oh, sorry. Can I just-
especially because it's supposed to be one public works now.
Oh, say again? They're merged?
I have the same questions when you're saying between PBOT, BES, like those as one public works. I feel like it makes sense for the standards to be similar.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. I was also, so for the, I guess, Commissioner Spivak, just in terms of, and it sounds like maybe speaking for some other issues that were, or concerns that were brought about, for the 225, you're asking that we identify that the reasoning was the concern about outreach to the sort of non-public infrastructure community and making sure that.
Yeah, I guess my support is for that to be in a project that's not labeled public infrastructure, so it feels like private owners would be impacted by it, and maybe there's another way of achieving it that addresses just this wide, it's a fixed number on a wide range of sites. So I recognize that sometimes complexity, you could probably write a really good code for that, it's going to add language to it that maybe it's better to be simple, but it seems like as a starting point, it's kind of weird to have the same threshold, whether it's a 4-acre site or a 10,000 square foot site. So,
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I heard Vice Chair O'Mara say, like, public infrastructure, similarly, folks who are primarily concerned with residential zoning would not have known to weigh in on this, so.
Okay.
Chair Thompson.
I don't know if this makes sense to include in the letter or not, but I just, one of my takeaways of this whole process goes back to the tours that we did. And I think we visited like 5 different sites or something. And the last site that we went to, it felt different. What is the name of that project site?
Skookum, is that?
Yeah, it's a wetland site from BES, but yeah. I don't remember the name. I guess I can find it if you'd like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just, there's one tiny piece of this project that's about allowing cultural harvesting and use of the site. And I think that I was just, that the place felt different, the level of care there, the vibrancy of the environment, and it just had a vibration about it. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know if other people on the tour felt that at all, but. Yeah.
And yeah, we haven't talked much about that allowance that we're putting in there, but yeah, that individual site was one where I think they are really committed to that sort of engagement and having a partnership with Native community on that. And yeah, I agree with you. Especially we sat into a covered sort of little area there at the end and talked, and it was an amazing site. Yeah. Right in the middle of a bunch of industrial land, but yes, it was it was a little bit of a respite, yes.
Others? Yeah. Okay.
And so so people know if they want to go check out that spot, I don't know if it's accessible, but it's, Schwakuk Wetland. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I was so bummed that I couldn't go on that tour. Okay.
Okay.
Well, Jeff, Daniel, thank you very much for all of your work and for presenting to us today. Do you have what you need to help us with the transmittal letter?
I think we're good.
Great. Oh, yes, please.
Thanks, staff, for it made it look like I actually understand this code really well. I don't know the environmental codes very well at all. And so I wanted to share just behind the scenes, I shared some things that seem like flags to me with staff. And most of those, it turned out I just didn't understand the code right. And they let me understand how it works. And those never surface as an amendment. So I just want people to feel like if you're on the commission here and you read something in a code project and you say, that doesn't really make sense, ask the question. And staff does a great job of talking you through, helping you understand the issue, baby. And maybe the staff did a great job. Most of these things here, this is a great project. So they talked me down from some things that I thought were concerns that are not concerns. And I left with just a couple little ones. So I don't want to feel like an intimidating process to come up with ideas because you're not an expert. None of us are experts on all the code things that come in front of us. It's kind of the exception. So thanks, staff. Yeah.
And we appreciate that. But I also, I'll put in a plug. I mean, we're happy to also, when you have interest, just a reminder, when you have interest in amendments and that sort of thing, we're happy to both give sort of basic understanding of what the code is doing and how it's doing, and then also to help write amendments to meet your intent. What are your objectives for those changes? And we are a resource to be able to do that for you. Thank you.
We hereby bless and release you. We're a little ahead of schedule. We are not time certain, I think, correct? Great. Let's move on if everyone's here. I see Troy.
Commissioner, Chair Routh, everyone that needs to be here is here. One of the staff is not able to be here this afternoon.
Great. I hope they're okay. Well, let's move on to our second, which is Central City Major Projects. This is an informational presentation, and it's with Central City, and DPS staff will present on various public and private development and planning efforts underway, including reconnecting Albina, Broadway Corridor, and OMSI master plans, James Beard Public Market, and others. And we will have time following their presentation for a Q&A. Troy, thank you for being here.
Yeah, sorry. Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorfer, I just wanted to provide a few opening remarks to this presentation. So Rachel Hoy, who is the supervising planner for the area and district, Central City and Area and District Planning Unit, is not able to be here today. So I just wanted to say a few kind of introductory remarks. So this presentation that you're getting, this informational briefing, we wanted to have an opportunity, staff wanted to have an opportunity to share with you what is happening in the Central City. I know that given the times that we're in, sometimes it feels like there isn't a lot happening in the Central City, but as you will see from the presentation, that there is in fact a lot going on. And Troy was going to provide an overview of a wide range of projects, both planning and implementation projects that are happening in the Central City right now, and we'll share a few highlights. I think what you're going to see through this presentation is really coordinated action on the part of multiple bureaus and in conjunction with Prosper Portland to facilitate housing production and to foster the economic revitalization of the Central City. There's an emphasis on establishing a residential base to improve the resiliency of the Central City, we learned through the pandemic that neighborhoods and areas that had a stronger residential base were, kind of more resilient coming out of the pandemic. And so we're really thinking about the future of the Central City in that way, with that lens of how to make the area more resilient. The projects are really focused on creating residential neighborhoods in the Central City, and with, again, an emphasis on working with private partners to make a variety of investments in open space, cultural institutions, housing, and other amenities that will both support residents and attract visitors, and really usher in the next chapter of the Central City. You'll see, like, as I mentioned, projects of various scales and types. The projects will range from, and they'll be from all phases of planning and implementation are represented on these lists. Some of the projects represented you have seen as a body in the past. You were part of legislative processes that set the table for those projects, and that is projects such as the OMSI corridor and the OMSI project and the Broadway corridor. Others are projects that you will probably see through the legislative process in the future. And so together, these projects really represent a significant amount of both public and private investment in the Central City, and we just wanted to make sure that you are aware of all the things that are going on. So with that, I will turn it over to Troy. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Good afternoon. Troy Doss, Senior Planner, Central City Team, BPS. So as Patricia noted, I'm going to go through a few projects here. I'm going to just give you first an overview of everything that's happening in Central City, and there's a lot. So we have 2 slides here that's just going to start to give you a sense of the various projects, and as Patricia noted, some of these are planning projects, some of them are development projects coming out of the ground, some of them are in the permit stage, some of these are public, some of them are private, and quite a few of them are public-private partnerships, which is great, which is kind of the Portland way, how we've gotten a lot of things done in the Central City over the years. So we have these projects here in the public and private planning efforts. We have projects both in the design and permitting phase, which we'll walk you through a couple highlights of each of those. We have projects that are in development or design review permit stage. So some are actively being built, you'll see, and then some are in this early kind of public investment stage where we're still doing some work on it, planning, design. These projects are coming together anywhere between this year and the next 5 years. We have a few projects we want to highlight as well that PBOT is working on, other transportation projects, and then there are projects that are happening in the central Portland area, so they're adjacent to the Central City and will definitely add to the vibrancy of this part of the metro area. So let me start. Why are you not? There you go. So we'll highlight these 3 to start off with. So we'll do with the Albina Vision Community Investment Plan, as well as the Reconnecting Communities project that we're currently working on. We'll talk about some of the work that's being done with the Central City Master Plan implementations that have been happening. Those projects have gone through Design Commission or are about to go through Design Commission, and some of them are in the active implementation stage. And then we'll walk you through a project that we're working on called the Central City Code Amendments Project. To start off with. So the Albina Vision Community Investment Plan was adopted in about 2022. It was followed about a 4-year, very active engagement process that AVT did with the community, especially members of the Black community, as well as other neighborhood interests in the area, trying to put together a vision for the area, mostly west of I-5. So it did include the highway cover to some extent that's been talked about, but they're really looking at the area in and around the Rose Quarter, areas that predominantly were housed Black Portland at one point. Homes, businesses that were taken away during the 50s and 60s by various major public projects. So that project's coming together. I will note that, and you look at the plan here on the diagram here, I'm sorry it doesn't read super well. We did try to increase the graphics a little bit on this, but you'll notice that we've divided the lower Albina area into 3 different components. This is part of the Reconnecting Albina project that we're currently working on. Just if you don't have any background on that, that's a $800,000 grant that we received during the Biden administration for the Reconnecting Communities process. That money is obligated, so it is still going forward, and it's paying for a group effort where it's AVT, BPS, PBOT, and Prosper Portland, working with other community interests to try to look at how we can do something in this area to really do restorative development. The area that AVT's mostly been focused on has been the area to the west of the highway cover. So that would be Rose Quarter, the Matthew Prophet site, which I'll talk about a little bit in a couple minutes, the waterfront, and then opportunity sites in and around the Rose Quarter. To the east of the highway, we're also looking at, we call that the eastern study area. That's focused mostly on Broadway and Weidler, that couplet. There's a number of redevelopment opportunity sites there. AVT's not as active in those areas, but is participating in our conversations about that. And then we have the central area, which is basically the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. And one of the things I want to highlight here is, although that project, as you probably noticed in the press lately, has been challenged by federal funding being pulled back, and then not quite the follow-through from the state at this time yet to go forward with the project. We're not resting on our laurels here. We're still working with the AVT and the community to really do everything we were talking about doing originally, just on an 8-acre part of the highway cover, and trying to expand it to 100+ acres on either side of the highway. So we don't really have, I don't see there being a problem with implementing the larger vision that came out of AVT through this project, regardless of what happens or when the highway cover actually happens. So that's the beginning of that. We will be bringing to you at some point some amendments probably for this area. So what we're doing right now is developing some scenarios for these different study areas. There's individual sub areas that are kind of broken down in here. But what we're really looking at is how do you do an urban design and development plan that promotes redevelopment of these areas for the benefit of Black Portland primarily, especially in the west area. And then we will be making some transportation system plan amendments. And then we're looking at what zoning amendments might be necessary to this. We're not doing a whole new plan for this area. We think the zoning code and comp plan direction that's in the area is pretty sufficient right now. There may be some minor tweaks that are needed, especially if the highway cover were to happen, for instance. That would fall into 3 different districts. So we want to make sure it's in one district and becomes easier to implement over time. But we're not looking at massive changes. We're really trying to work within the existing framework we have here and make changes just as judiciously as we need to. The next projects I'm going to walk you through is the various master plans that have come through. So you may recall that during the 2035 plan, there was a new master plan provision put in the code, and it targeted 5 different sites around the central city that if they redevelop those sites, they go through what's called the Central City Master Plan. And what happens there is we look at comprehensively, how is the site going to be laid out from like a site plan position, how much open space is going to be put into them, what kind of circulation pattern is going to come through. And as the plan's being reviewed by Design Commission, they're also looking at what are the infrastructure needs in there. So what the city's been actively doing is really working with these different entities as they come forward when they're developing these plans and then helping them implement them after they're done. So in terms of like the pre-development type work, the Lloyd Master Plan is a good example where Urban Renaissance Group is looking at the redevelopment of this 32-acre site. The city is actively involved, working with them, identifying issues that'll have to be addressed when the plan starts to get to an implementation stage. After the plans are adopted, such as the Broadway Corridor Master Plan and the OMSI Master Plan, that's where you see the city starting to really come in, often the infrastructure bureaus or Prosper Portland, helping to fund some of those improvements. So what you'll see, like on the Broadway Master Plan site, the site, if you may have noticed, the post office is now gone. The site's been cleared. There's already some early infrastructure work occurring there. And soon, Home Forward will be producing this first housing project there, which is about it's a 240 unit, or 230 units of affordable housing between 30 and 60 MFI, wood frame timber mass project that's going to be coming out of the ground. At the same time, Parks and Recreation is working on extension of the North Park blocks into the site and then past the PNCA properties as well. So those things are starting to all come together on those sites. Similarly with the OMSI Master Plan, the city has been actively involved as well as the state trying to put some funding in for some of the infrastructure improvements that are there, as well as the relocation of Water Avenue, which will open up more of the site for redevelopment. And the next one I want to talk about is the City Code Amendments Project. So what we found is after we adopted the 2035 plan, which this happens frequently, we first identified, well, there's a couple things that were tweaks that need to be made to make some of the development standards work just a little bit better. So that was kind of the genesis of the project. But then the housing situation in Portland following the pandemic and the change in terms of office shifting more to a homework environment has really changed the way that Central City operates in a lot of ways. And there's really more of a need for housing at this point. And so what we've been trying to figure out is where are there impediments in the code right now that are barriers to successfully implementing housing and implementing it quicker. There's also other areas where we could probably increase the development potential in some sites. Although the number of sites were increased in terms of height and FAR during the 2035 plan, there are other sites we could still look at. And so we're actively going through a process. It's in the preliminary stages right now. So you'll be seeing some concepts coming out in discussion drafts here probably in a couple months. But we're going to be looking at increasing the flexibility for residential as well as employment development when it comes back around. Looking at increasing height in certain areas, looking at new FAR bonuses, targeted more towards multi-bedroom units, because what we find is that 85% of the housing in Central City is one bedroom and studio apartments. So not a great long-term solution for sustainable neighborhoods. Looking at also how we can assist the food cart situation in Portland better. Right now, they're listed as vehicles, so they're only allowed to be in surface parking lots. There's been a desire to have them in other locations, so we're trying to figure out how to loosen that up for them. And then we're just looking at other standards in the code, throughout the code, that may be barriers to residential development. In the project design phase, the one I want to highlight is what Albina Vision is doing with the Matthew Profit site, which is the PPS headquarters. You've probably seen elements of this in the past, but it's about I think the full site size is somewhere in the 12-acre, 10 and a half acre site. And they're looking at putting about 1,200 units there. They're going through a Central City master plan process like we just discussed. That will be coming in sometime later this year or early next year. So they'll be looking at doing housing, generous open space built into the site, as well as a hub for early childhood education and daycare or components like that. That's yet to be finalized, but that's the current thinking. So we should be seeing some initial master plan ideas for that coming out sometime later this year. In the review stage, there's a couple exciting projects that are starting to come together. So one that you may have noticed if you've been by the Lloyd Center recently, the old Nordstrom's building is being demolished as we speak, and the first new performance venue of 2 that's being proposed in Central City will be coming online there. That is approximately a 2,000 to 4,500 person facility, about 68,000 square feet. It's promoted by AEG Group, which is a national group, and then the local promoter is Monkey Productions. It's going to be a 2-story, 68,000 square foot building, and it looks like it's going to go live probably somewhere in the early 2027. The next project is, you can probably see when you've noticed when you're in the building, you can notice it just across the way here is the new PSU Schnitzer School of Art, Design, and History, Art History. And what that is they're combining basically all of their arts and design programs and architecture program into one building. They've been spread out around the campus for a long time. Excuse me. This project is a mass timber project, 4 stories. It's going to have lecture rooms, gathering spaces for different events, 2 different galleries, and it's really going to blend a multidisciplinary approach towards design in a way that the university has long been seeking. And then the last project I want to talk about is the James Beard project. This one is coming online. It is just a block to the north of Pioneer Square. The project is currently has about $12 million in public and private financing. It's seeking another $12 million through donations. They are looking at a possible start date in June of 2026, at least for the first phase. It's really in 2 different buildings. So they've acquired one building and they have a long-term lease on the other. And eventually it will hold 40 different businesses. So it's going to be everything from coffee to meats to floral to you name it, everything you would find at your typical public market. And they will have a rooftop event space as well on top of this. In terms of some of the public investment projects that are going on, Parks has 2 that are fairly exciting right now. So we have the Darcel 15 Plaza, which is where O'Brien Square used to be. That project's coming online. This is semi-temporary facility. So this isn't, I think there's going to be a longer term play to do something, but right now they're putting in some pretty significant investment. The park should be open sometime later this year, and it will include performance space, dog park, overhead structures to allow it to be used in different times of year, different lighting arrangements. They're also going to be incorporating some of the cast iron steel components that we used to have down in the Old Town area. And this park will be, I guess I say, it should be online probably by around the holidays is what they're looking for at this point. And then the next one is the Steel Bridge skate park. This one's been talked about for quite a while. This is going to be an interesting one because it's going to have very different components for different types of skating. It's going to have spectator viewing area as well as a competition bowl. This is going to be at the kind of the knuckle there where the two different ramps come up to the steel bridge and where light rail comes down. The project is looking to go online sometime in 2029. In terms of some of the transportation projects, one of the things I want to highlight about this, and I think we've talked about this before when we brought 2035 through, is 40% of the central city's landmass is public right-of-way. And so it's a tremendous amount of space that's being used for one sole purpose. And so these projects are really trying to turn the dynamic on that a little bit and saying, how can we better use this space for something other than just purely single-trip occupancy trips? So Central City Motions, the first one that came out, this one started pre-pandemic, and it's a course of about 18 different projects. There's the Rose Lanes that you've been noticing around town, the improvements you're seeing out in front of the building on 4th Avenue, a number of the separated bikeways, a lot of the crosswalk improvements that are occurring throughout the Central City, some of the new intersections that are being lit in different areas to allow for better bike mobility. These are all part of this larger suite of projects. And the idea is really to try to reduce the number of single occupancy trips to and from the central city and trying to promote more ease of using both the bike and bus lanes. Prior to the pandemic, you may recall rush hour getting out of downtown was a bit of a hassle. The Rose Lanes really made a huge difference right off the bat on that. Some of the other things that are happening is they're also putting in bus rapid transit improvements. So we're really maximizing that investment we've made to the east of the county into the central city. And then another one that came out of the pandemic is the Street Plaza Activation Project. And this one's interesting because this was really a spinoff of the Portland Healthy Business Permit Program where people were trying to keep their businesses alive by providing spaces outside during the lockdowns. These became very popular. Businesses really started to like them. And these are ideas that were kind of circulated pre-pandemic and thought, can we really use the right of way for this? Is that the most effective use for it? Well, it turned out that it became very popular. And so when these are coming together, there's 8 of these right now in the central city that are either existing or proposed. There's about 20 of them central or citywide. These are usually always put together through a combination of involvement with the local community as well as local businesses. So they're really benefiting from these, and they're taking ownership of these spaces and helping them in their long-term liability. And then the last one I'll highlight here is the Green Loop, which I know you've heard a lot about. We have 2 different projects that are starting to come together. So for those who don't know about the Green Loop, it is a proposed 6-mile bike, ped, jogging, passive, and semi-active recreation loop that would connect various components around the central city, connects a number of the districts in downtown, but also some of the major gathering spaces. So it will go from OMSI to the new Lloyd development at the mall. It'll go over to the Rose Quarter, go through the central, different business areas in the Central East Side. It'll connect with the cultural district. It'll connect with PSU. And the idea here is really to try to improve the ability to jog and walk and do some biking for the more safety cautious kind of cyclists. Provide a little more urban forestry canopy throughout the central city, and to create spaces where maybe businesses can actually spill out onto this amenity. So we really kind of propose it more or less, sometimes it gets characterized as a bike lane. We really try to look at it more as a linear park that's being developed. And to follow through on that right now, the idea came out of the 2035 plan, but right now the governance and implementation ideas around that are being promoted or studied by Prosper Portland with a group of other city bureaus. So how can we finance, build, how do we govern this thing going forward? Who manages it? Who maintains it? All those components are starting to be looked at. At the same time, PBOT has a accompanying project that's looking at where do we complete parts of the alignment we haven't quite nailed yet. So we have some areas in this area here, how you get from PSU down to South Waterfront. The terrain's challenging. The ability to use the right-of-way is a little more challenged in this area. So we're trying to find the best route there and then lock that in. I'm doing the same thing over at OMSI, same thing over in the Rose Quarter. At the same time, they're trying to figure out what are the right standards, because most of this work is going to be in the public right-of-way. What's the right approach to regulating that, to creating development standards for it? Also recognizing that although we're trying to keep a fairly similar character to the Green Loop as it goes through the central city, we recognize that each segment of it's going to be different because of the context of what's happening around it. So we're trying to address all of those through these two different studies, and those are going forward throughout this year and into next year. Now, the last two projects I'm going to highlight, and I'm probably going to lean on Patricia to answer a couple of questions around these ones, but these are projects that are adjacent to the central city, but definitely are going to have an impact on what's going on with the central city and feed on the energy here. So there's the Montgomery Park project, and the master plan just came through. And then I'm going to also highlight, I think what I'll do is leave the Montgomery Park, come back to that in a second, and let Patricia talk a little bit more about that. She's way more versed than I am. And then we have another project that's finally starting to come out of the ground. So it's the long kind of awaited Slabtown Conway Park as part of the Conway Master Plan that came out of 2011. It's about a 1 acre site. Parks is going through the process of acquiring it right now in early design phase. We don't really have a target timeline in terms of when that would be developed, but this has been a lot of energy trying to get to this point. There's about $5 million currently assigned to starting some of the pre-development work on that. And so let me go back to Montgomery Park.
Thank you, Troy. Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. So you all are, well, the commissioners who are here towards the end of last year are familiar with this project, but Commission recommended for approval and City Council ultimately adopted a plan for the Montgomery Park area. It's about an 80-acre area that includes some, a couple of key opportunity sites. And this representation here is kind of the visualizations of what this area could look like in the future with the street grid reintegrated and higher intensity mixed use development. So I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but this is a plan that, was adopted at the end of last year, and implementation is currently taking place. I know there's some, future projects that are the property owners are starting to look into the future development of the site and some opportunities that are available there. So I think just to conclude, I don't know if you have any concluding remarks, Troy, but we wanted to just show you kind of a very sweeping, fast survey of all of the things, a lot of the things that are happening downtown and then the central city area that we really, collectively believe will transform the central city over the next 5 to 10 years and position the city to be, the thriving, active central city that we have always enjoyed, that we have enjoyed for a long time. So with that, we're happy to, hear from you all, answer any questions and your reflections. So thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to close by saying, these projects are going to do everything that Patricia just noted, but we're also talking somewhere about 10,000 new units being proposed through these various large sites. Number of jobs being created through each of these, both in construction and long-term jobs that are on what's going to happen on the sites. And the nice thing, what I'm noticing as I'm going through these different projects, especially some of these major projects, so the School of Design done by Lever Architecture, a local firm, Lloyd Performance Center done by Works Progress Architecture, local firm, Skate Park, Dow Architecture, local firm. These are all local businesses that are also, taking part in this. So this is, I think, something to be celebrated.
Thank you, Troy. I saw people writing many notes.
Yeah, Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record, thank you so much. I'm so impressed with everything you covered. It's hard enough for me to remember details of one project, let alone like the 12 that you just, or more that you just covered in such detail. So I'm really glad this was brought forward. I think Chair Routh, I had mentioned months ago, I think it was an Eco Northwest map that was like all of the projects in the central city and how we need to be talking about this. So I'm really happy this was brought forward. I do have a question about the 4 master planned. Do those need to go through an additional approval process? Or were you just highlighting that those projects are moving forward? You kind of had them packaged in a way that I wasn't clear if there was a combined master planning approval process in the future, or just talking
those-
about the projects?
So two of them have gone through what's called the Central City Master Plan, which is in the code. That process is you go to Design Commission, you get that approved. And once that's done, you can go forward with doing your development on the site, but you still have to go through, like, for the individual buildings, they will still go through a permitting and review process on that. But the beauty of the master plan process is when you went to Design Commission on a large site with an individual building in the past, they struggled with what's the urban design context, how's this going to influence that, how's it going to change over time. This sets the table pretty early, so it's more predictable, and it makes the review of the subsequent projects a bit easier. So 2 of those already gone through, OMSI and the Broadway corridor. There's actually another one that went through down below us at the River Place site. And then the Lloyd Mall site is starting to come together, and then there's one being proposed also for the Matthew Prophet site by AVT. So we'll have 2 new master plans coming online probably next year.
Commissioner Knowles.
Hey, Troy. Good to see you.
See you.
I just wanted to follow up on that question about the Central City Master Plan sites. So I'm curious how leadership at the city works for sort of a big project like that. Let's take the Lloyd Center, where there's likely to be a need for some public investment in infrastructure, probably in transportation, to really fully realize the potential there. That's probably true for the other sites as well. Who at the city is in charge of making these things happen at this point?
Yeah, well, it varies depending on the site to some extent, but the majority of these sites, there's been a partnership that's usually pulled together by Prosper Portland. So they'll pull together the various infrastructure bureaus. They'll bring us together if there's still some questions about zoning or implementation intent. So for the Lloyd one might be a little more of a challenge to explain because that one's still coming together. There probably will be some asks, but we don't know what they are yet. But for the OMSI site, for instance, they are looking for some dollars, infrastructure dollars, because there are some significant, it was a former industrial site, so there really wasn't a lot of, neighborhood-based infrastructure put in there. So that's going to help with that. And there's a contribution from both the state as well as the city in terms of relocating Water Avenue. So that's one of those things where that happens. And they usually have a technical advisory group that follows the implementation. So we'll do some pre-work with them, which we did on the OMSI site. We've done it with each of these sites. We have a group that will work with them, identifying the issues, what are the needs. It'll go through Design Commission, get approved, and then as it goes into the post-review process, once it's been approved, Prosper and the other bureaus will be working with them to bring dollars to the project and help them projects move forward.
Well, let me just follow up on that, taking OMSI for an example. So if the leadership on the private side wants to talk to the city, who are they talking to, or does it depend on the subject?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Commissioner Knowles. Patricia Diefendorfer. Yeah, I think as Troy mentioned, it kind of depends on the project and what the needs of the project are. In the case of OMSI, for example, specifically, that's a situation where multiple bureaus are working together. Prosper has taken the lead, and there was actually a term sheet for a development agreement that was approved by council, the previous council. So that term sheet for that development agreement outlines what the different parties that are, both the public and private parties that are involved in that project, what they're each responsible for, what kind of resources they're going to bring to the project. So as Troy mentioned, Water Avenue is a major infrastructure project that needs to happen to facilitate development in that area. And the term sheet identifies, what funding and what assistance the city's going to provide, and then what the OMSI as a private partner and other property owners in the area are responsible for. So that's one example, and it really does depend on the project and the project needs. If, you know, many of these master plan sites, I think, as you see, they are larger sites that were not necessarily, they were developed with a use, and now they're being kind of, those large sites are being broken down into smaller sites, you know, street grid and blocks are being integrated, and so there are infrastructure needs. And so those projects really are, that's why I think we kind of have them under the sort of the rubric of public-private partnerships, because it is kind of requiring the city and the private partner to work together to help make those projects come to, you know, to realize those projects. And the city is, where it can, trying to identify resources and provide technical assistance on the infrastructure pieces. And so, for example, I just wanted to highlight the Matthew Prophet site that Troy mentioned, that is part of the Albina Vision Trust. That is kind of the site that they're first looking to, you know, to develop in the area, their larger community investment plan area. And that site, the city council provided resources for staff of all bureaus to do sort of pre-development assistance conference with them. So for some time now, we have been, the city bureaus have been meeting with AVT to work with them and troubleshoot, you know, issues related to development of the site. And it's almost like a, you know, a very, very early assistance process that we've been going through with them to prepare them for the master plan and submitting an application for a master plan. So it really often involves multiple bureaus, and the you know, how things are set up is based on what the needs of the project are.
Okay, great. That's a very helpful explanation. Chair Roth, I do have one other question, but I'm happy to hold off on that until others have a chance to weigh in.
No, we got time, do it.
Okay. So my other question was specifically about the Rose Quarter area and the Moda Center. It seems likely, based on today's reporting, that there's going to be some sort of development activity, either as a renewal of the Moda Center, or, this is hard to imagine, a rebuilding of another facility. But I'm wondering how the Bureau in particular is prepared to step in and to provide some guidance on land use and design issues, and or whether it's just too early in that process to know how you would respond.
Well, so we've retooled the Reconnecting Albina project a little bit based on that news. So one of the things we initially were trying to do is we were kind of come up with preferred alternatives. Because at the time when we started the project almost 2 years ago, we were working with Rip City Management when we're talking about the Rose Quarter specifically. And so we thought we would come up with maybe a preferred land use and urban design scenario for each of these sub areas. Knowing now that it's likely to be it's going to be a different group, we're kind of come up with a range of different ideas for these things. But one of the things we don't want to lose focus of the work we're doing with the AVT and the community in terms of reconnecting Albina and restorative development. So it's really going to be important that that plan incorporates a number of goals and objectives that will help kind of build the North Star for what we're trying to achieve through any development that happens in this area. That could result in kind of some term sheets for like future partnerships or public-private development. They're not beholden to that necessarily, but that's one of the ideas we have, is trying to work on that. We will still make ourselves available as we have with these other major sites and working with the various bureaus on trying to, you know, make something happen here. But AVT is also actively involved in these conversations. I'm sure they'll be reaching out to any future ownership of the Blazers as well, because they do have control over a number of key properties in this area. Especially there's the Rose Quarter garages, where Rip City Management's offices are currently located. Those are buildings that could be redeveloped and made larger, other uses. The waterfront site's another one of those, and they do have control over those as well. So we're mindful of that, but it doesn't change the overall objectives of what we're trying to do in the area. So we think there's room to do both.
Okay.
Commissioner,
great. Thank you.
I'll just add very quickly that I think want to be very clear that we're doing a district planning process for that area. You saw the map that was on the slide related to this particular project. There's a broader district that we're looking at. And as you know, I'm sure you're familiar with planning processes. You kind of operate with the information that you know at the time, but you really try to do plans that are encompassing, that really try to provide, as Troy said, a vision for the future that is enduring, no matter what kind of changes kind of occur in the area, recognizing that there's some anchor things and that we, in anchor kind of uses in that area that we need to be mindful of. But really, we continue to see the value of the work in doing a district plan for this area that thinks about, how you can create more of a neighborhood in the Albina area, how it can also serve the entertainment venues and the surrounding community. And so that is the work of that project. And it's been going on for a while, and it'll continue for some time in the future.
Commissioner Pollock.
Commissioner Pollock, for the record, I kind of just have a related question for the eastern sub-area of the Albina, Reconnecting Albina plan. You said that the Albina Vision Trust wasn't as focused on that area, but the city and them were still working on what they would like to see happen. And I was kind of just curious if what the city is kind of thinking about or considering for that area, given that it's so kind of different from the western area.
Well, it's an area that we might want to increase some of the entitlements there to encourage some redevelopment, especially for residential on there. We still hold on to wanting to do a Main Street environment on Broadway and a similar approach on Weidler. If you look at that area right now, it's a lot of vacant and surface parking lots. Some of them are being used by an auto dealership. They have talked in the past about maybe consolidating that parking into a structure and then allowing for that other area to be redeveloped. So we're going to continue to look at that as a possibility. But when I say Albina AVT is not looking to do any specific project in there, but they do want to see a restoration of the Main Street environment that occurred there prior to the I-5 development. That's very key to them. And that's why when we talk about reconnecting Albina, we're really talking about trying to bridge some of the major infrastructure gaps that have taken out pieces of the neighborhood, putting back streets where they weren't before or where they were before, and then rebuilding some of that commercial Main Street environment with maybe a mix of residential above on Weidler and Broadway. So I don't want to characterize that they don't care about it. They're focused on certain development sites that are really more to the west area, but they do want to see that restoration of the neighborhood that once existed there. It's very key to them. They like to see some, we've talked about what are the right urban design approaches to those areas, and Afrofuturism, things like that comes along quite a bit. How could those types of things be embedded into the urban form in that area?
Say thank you.
Commissioner Spivak, for the record, these might be, I'm thinking of the projects you introduced that might come to us. I'm assuming it would be the Central City Code update for housing. So 2 thoughts on that. One is, I've heard, you might know this, like in terms of using existing office buildings for housing, you can do up to 1/3 of the units without triggering seismic, up to 1/3 of the floor area with the cap on occupancy. And I heard recently that some projects might do that, except they're in the IH zone, which doesn't allow housing at all. So in the Inner East Side, the area you were just referring to, like out to 12th, there are some buildings there that are built for office. They could, in theory, use that, make a couple floors of them residential, but they would not be allowed to because it's not zoned for housing, because it's IH use.
IG1.
Am I using the wrong word for it? Okay.
It's probably, it's industrial.
It's industrial use. It's industrial use. So I just didn't know if that was on the table or not with this to the conversion, but it might be worth. There are a limited number of property owners who would know whether they know this rule, but they know they can't do it because of the zoning, if it's not a building code. And I'll say the other code thing I thought through my head. This is because I'm more interested in commerce and parks, and I think that in the open space zone, you have to go through probably a type 3 conditional use to do any kind of retail sales or service in an open space. And I wonder whether that might be an impediment to doing commerce in parks. That could
not
be
in the Central City. So
that's not true? Okay,
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
what we did during the 2035 plan, we did pass some provisions that allowed them to do up to 5,000 square feet by right. So they can do that.
That's great. Okay, I did not know that. Thanks.
Well, first of all, Troy, thank you for the presentation. You covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time. There's a lot to be excited about. I wanted to go back to the public contributions that were necessary on some of these projects. And Patricia, you were talking about how sometimes those are the details of those contributions are codified in term sheets. And I'm curious if there's a framework or system for community engagement where that is the case. I know that AVT and the OMSI plan, like that's really foundational to the entire effort. With the Montgomery Park, we saw the public benefit agreement, I think it was called. I'm just curious with some of these others, like Broadway Corridor or Lloyd Center, like where there is an expectation of public contribution, like who oversees that and what is that mechanism?
I'll just start, and maybe Troy, you can help me out here. I know many of these sites have been in the works for some time, right? I think it kind of depends on the sites and the interested parties, what community groups are, so for example, I'll say Broadway Corridor as an example. That was a publicly owned site, right? I believe it was owned by Prosper, and it had a variety of, right, but I think that it's in public ownership, and I believe Prosper has some ownership in that. It may not be the entirety of the area, but nonetheless, I think that's a situation where there was, public land, public investment in the form of TIF investment, and there was a community benefits agreement. I mean, I think you may recall from the conversations we had related to the Montgomery Park plan. In that instance, Prosper, I think, kind of convened and led a conversation and a group of stakeholders around a conversation about a community benefits agreement. And so my recollection, I'm sorry, I'm not 100% recalling, I believe there was an agreement. I don't recall exactly the status of that agreement, but there certainly were terms that were, developed, and I don't remember exactly.
It's been adopted.
The terms of that.
Yeah, they had an exhaustive, maybe 2-3 year process with the public developing the community benefits agreement. So it was owned by the Post Service. It was acquired by Prosper Portland. So they own the entire postal site, as well as they own, I believe, the Union Station now too, which is part of that area. And so the idea was, what's the community benefits? What's going to be the benefit to the community when we do this? It's been memorialized by agreement that it was adopted by City Council. So it's fairly involved in these. And we're seeing something similar with OMSI. I mean, it was when these agreements are made, they will go through a city council process. People are weighing in how it's being done. There's different levels of involvement based on geography and how much of a community is actually involved in the different sites. AVT, for instance, what they've been doing through the community investment plan has been extensive community involvement, and then we're building on to that as well. So these things are daylighted pretty heavily.
Who administers the public benefit agreement?
For that one, it would be through Prosper, and I don't know what the legality in terms of who governs it, that type of thing.
Yeah. Typically, a development agreement is typically, as we talked about in the Montgomery Park process, essentially it's a contract between the city and some private partners. Usually, the ones that I've seen that we do here in the city, it's often multiple signatories to these agreements. They tend to include the city as an entity, Prosper as an entity, and then some private entity. And the agreement outlines what each of those entities are responsible for in terms of obligations, what resources they're going to bring to the project. And so typically, often, it's Prosper and the city together that ensure the implementation and that the obligations of those agreements are being met. And so it really varies. I think what you're hearing is it kind of varies a lot based on the specifics of the site and what the partnership has involved and what the projects have needed over time. In the case of OMSI, as we mentioned, there was a term sheet that was developed. It wasn't a full development agreement, but the term sheet outlines kind of all the parties' roles and responsibilities and, the kinds of commitments that are being made by each of the parties are memorialized in that term sheet. Whereas in the example of Montgomery Park, a very different example as we talked about, where there was no public land, no public financing, save what's happening with the streetcar. I think we took the approach of a value capture strategy and developed a public benefit agreement that's an agreement between the city, the property owner, the property owner of the main opportunity site in the area, and Portland Streetcar Inc. is a signatory of that particular public benefit agreement. So those are just some examples to show that there are permutations. It's the basic idea is similar across these projects, but who ends up taking the lead in some ways depends on what the specific circumstances of that particular project are.
Okay, yeah, I mean, understanding there's a lot of nuance, I'm mostly just curious about the implementation piece, and a lot of time, sometimes years is spent developing these, and then we start to see the individual projects move forth, and I don't know very much about the Broadway corridor one. I know Montgomery Park, it was like fairly complicated, and if then this number of units, then that unlocks this other potential, and so just trying to understand like who has eyes on that and how is that enforced or followed through the course of a project. Yeah.
Kind of to follow up on that, what is, if I may, the timeline for the Broadway corridor? I remember, it's been years.
Well, I think most time we'd say these are 20-year plans, but they are working right now on the first housing project, which is great, and then the extension of the park blocks as well. So I think that most of these things are going to be driven by market conditions. I think this one, the first housing project, is an affordable housing project, so it's fairly heavily subsidized. That one's easier to come out of the ground right now, but when the market's ready, these sites are ready, and they are trying to get ahead of that by doing some of the infrastructure work or being prepared to do it as the demand comes on. So.
Chair O'Meara.
I have another question. This one is also about the Central City Code and Housing Project. You mentioned the majority of the unit sizes being studios, ones. I can attest to we've got a lot of SROs as well in our Central City. Wondering if there is coordination and engagement with PPS as we look at that plan. And, one of the, I think, barriers to family-sized units in the Central City is access to public schools. And so just wondering if there's some coordination as we see declining PPS enrollment. Is there essentially like an opportunity mapping exercise that could be done around family-sized units with the existing Central City schools, mostly on the east side, I think. But maybe even some future stage planning of could there be potential for new Central City public school growth? So just wondering if that's happening.
That's been discussed. I mean, it's not actively happening right now because I think we're still a ways from that kind of demand for them. But when we did the North Pearl plan, for instance, 15 years ago, we were actively engaged with them in that conversation because there was a desire at that point to do a lot more family housing in the Pearl, and how would you then support that with, would you overburden Chapman, for instance, with that? Similar conversations come up with development in the Lloyd, because if you live in the Lloyd right now, your closest elementary school is in Ladd's Addition. So not ideal, right? So one of the things they're looking at is when the demand happens, I think they're looking at how to respond with that. There's conversations involving the I-5 project as well about a relocation of Harriet Tubman someplace. Could that be in a place that might, benefit that kind of growth as well? They're not there yet, and they don't need to be there yet, but they're mindful of it, yeah.
Sorry, Commissioner Alvarado, did you have something?
I have my hand raised, but I am kind of chewing on something. I was curious about, I think it was the Albina project, and you mentioned the term restorative development. I know that there are various aspects of that, and so I'm just curious. Like, that sounds like, from my knowledge of it, it's a kind of a more social aspect. But are there other aspects of restorative development that are also implemented in that?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the right person to define exactly what restorative development means, but I mean, the big key here is wealth creation, right? So when AVT and others are in the area are looking at this topic, they're looking at both how can you afford to live in a place, how can you afford to have a business in a place, but also job creation through construction contracts, and that could be through the infrastructure as well as the development of the buildings themselves. Opportunities to have job training in some of these developments as well. So when I don't want to speak for AVT, but when they use the phrase restorative development, those are the types of things that they're often talking about. And they also want to provide a place for people who've been displaced over the years from this community to be able to come back to it if they choose to. So it's multifaceted.
I have a few other questions. Thank you. Also, it feels like just a buffet table of potential questions. Related to the Lloyd Center, in the last year, I believe there were 3 potential sites for entertainment venues. There was, Keller redevelopment, there's PSU, and then there was Lloyd. And I'm curious, to what extent is this the same Lloyd project for an entertainment venue that's going forward separately, or is this like a scaled back? I'm curious what that.
So let me see if I can answer this question. I was involved in a little bit the look that the city was doing in terms of what was initially called a Keller replacement, right? So if you had to replace Keller someplace else, where would you do it? And I think the final decision was they're looking at PSU just across the street here, and then still doing something also with the Keller. I'm not really sure how that plays out yet. Those are more for like the large performances, opera, ballet, Broadway. The performance venue in the Lloyd and the other one, which has been talked about in the Central East Side, those are basically your typical but brand new state-of-the-art performance venues for concerts. The people who are behind them are both the 2 largest concert promoters in the country, and they're looking at trying to create something that Portland just quite frankly doesn't have right now. We really don't have a new modern state-of-the-art concert venue for touring bands, and so that's something that's been long desired to be here. And so both of those projects are breaking ground right now. Yeah.
Thank you. And another question: when you were talking about the Green Loop and re-looking at designs, are you talking about? Did I hear the possibility of opening up PBOT's road standard design guides? Are we going there, or?
Well, no. I mean, I guess in some ways, yes. But the Green Loop is largely going to be in the public right-of-way, as opposed to private property. So we really look at it as a Title 17. What's the right standards for that? Who maintains it? How does it get built? Are there certain conditions in which the Green Loop character and that standard changes based on the use it's fronting? So it may be different going through the Central East Side than it is going through the park blocks, for instance. Just different environment. It will be different when there's a dramatic change in slope, as it is from PSU down the South Waterfront. So those are the types of things they're trying to figure out, as opposed to just one standard fits it all. It really won't work.
Sure.
And then how will that work into their own standards?
Right. Yeah, I guess I think about that also in context of, as we're looking forward at the transportation system plan update. I don't know if that's a moment where we
probably
look
won't
at
be a part of the next TSP, but I would think a subsequent one would be my guess. I mean, right now, there are a few sections of the Green Loop that already exist. I mean, so you can go to the area outside the Ritz-Carlton on Park Avenue, and there it is, right? You can go to the Blumenauer Bridge, there it is. Moody Avenue, already there. So there's certain ways in which it's there. There's other areas where we want to just achieve something different. Where it goes past the cultural district could be a very different feel than when it's going through the Midtown blocks, just a couple blocks to the north. Yeah.
And I guess my last is a comment. Forgive me if I may, I always enjoy going sort of last because you all have had so many other great questions, and some of them were on my list. Related to, I think it's notable as we are talking about what are projects that revitalize and that are signature, that we are known for, that we love, that the Burnside Skate Park was completely unsanctioned when it started. It is in some ways the ultimate in community involvement, right? Like that you see something and you do something. It's not completely it's okay, so there's concrete involved, but it's not unlike, for example, like a Desire Line when you see, you know, a goat path that people have worn over time of where they wish a sidewalk was, and that is community involvement. And I was at a national, international skate documentary showing last year, as you do, and and I didn't appreciate to what extent that skate park that we have now, you know, retroactively sanctioned and are now revitalizing has been such a beloved gem in the national and international skate. Like people, you know, there are a whole bunch of video games that, you know, that center the Burnside Skate Park.
It's in the very first Tony Hawk video game. It is a mecca for skateboarders when they come to Portland. Some people come to Portland just to skate that park.
It truly is, yeah. And so I hope that, you know, that we bring in, as we're looking to revitalize and invigorate our public right-of-way, that we allow ourselves to dream in that way. And I will just say, related to the street plazas, that is one piece, you know, that started Parking Day. I'm just going to do a little, since we have time, you know, Parking Day that started in San Francisco. What is the idea? What are all of the ways, if not for, you know, temporarily storing a single occupancy vehicle, what are all of the ways that we could use a single parking spot? And that was the original of Parking Day. It has allowed for New York street seats, it allowed for our street seats program and around the world. This year's Parking Day is on September 19th. Just saying. Okay, that's what I got. Others? Questions, comments? Commissioner Knowles.
Well, just a quick wrap up. First of all, Troy, that was a great presentation. Really wrapped everything together. I'm so encouraged by seeing the number of projects we have going on in the Central City and adjacent to the Central City. And I think my one observation is that it gives me hope that the city is acting intentionally to make these things happen. These projects often will have private sponsors who are very deliberate. I mean, AVT is doing a great job of leading that effort for their part of the Central City. But others really need the help of the city in its various functions to be really strong partners, if not project managers, to make these things happen. So I think this is a reminder of just how much opportunity there is, but also how much work there is still to be done to make them happen. Again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Troy.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last words or thoughts for the good of the order? Before we adjourn shockingly early. Okay. Thank you all for being here. And this concludes our August 12th commission hearing session. And we are adjourned. Thank you.